Okay, so Mary, I'm going to walk you through my process here. When my partner brings sap to me, he brings it over and he puts it in my holding tank, which is just a tote. And from the holding tank then, I've got a pump in there that'll pump it up into this elevated tank that's up on stilts, basically. And the reason I put it up there is so that it can flow by itself down to the boiler. Okay, and I don't have to keep a pump running to do that. And then it'll just gravity flow down to the boiler. And that has a float valve on it that line goes into, and that float valve serves the purpose to keep the sap level in the boiler at a constant. Because as you're boiling it, you're getting rid of a lot of the water. And so if you didn't keep refilling it, it's going to get lower and lower and lower. So the float valve will keep that level constant all the time. As it goes into the boiler, it makes quite a long pathway through a bunch of channels and loops in the boiling pans. And by the time it gets to the last compartment or the last channel, by that time it's concentrated enough I can draw it off. And I will periodically draw off 2 to 3 gallons. And then I take that over to another pot with on top of a gas burner, and I boil it to finish it then. So it's easier that way. I have more control on the end product that way. The boiler here works good to get it mostly concentrated, but it's kind of a crude process. It's hard to control to a real good degree. So,
what are you using to heat underneath here? I can feel the warmth coming up.
Feels good. Just wood, yeah. I buy slab wood from one of the local sawmills, and it's generally always hardwood, which heats the best too. So,
what is happening here?
what happens in the boiler here, the way this one is designed, is that the raw sap, basically the sap from the trees, comes in through here. As you can see from the beginning here, it's basically raw sap. I mean, just about like water. It doesn't have any color to it. There's channels in the boiler here. It comes in there, goes around twice, goes out, comes into this pan, goes across the back of it, out and back through this pan, and follows the pathway all the way through to the draw-off point here. All the time that it's making that trip, it's boiling and it's concentrating. There's water leaving it or moisture leaving it all the way along. And so when you get to the end, here's halfway through, you can see it's a little more concentrated, a little darker in color.
Yep.
Okay. And then as you get a little farther on down the line, it's more yet. Okay. And then when you get to the draw-off point here, now it's concentrated.
Now it looks like syrup.
Yeah, it's starting to look like syrup. So as you put sap in one end, it's constantly pushing all the way back to draw-off point.
So now then you're saying draw-off point. So when it gets here, look, you've got a spigot here.
Yes.
How do you get it from here over to your final cooking area?
I take a big pot and I set it down on the ground under that spigot, and I just put about 3 gallons in there. And then I take that and I pour it into the next, through a filter and into the next boiling pot. So.
And how long does that last section take to finish making the syrup?
It'll take about an hour, hour and a half. You want it to have a little thickness, but if you overcook it, it's still good syrup, nothing wrong with it, but it'll start to sugar in your jars, like sometimes honey will do in your cupboard. Maple syrup will do the same thing if you concentrate it too much, so you don't want to overcook it either. Kind of want to watch that pretty close when you make it.
How do you know?
I use a hydrometer to check it, and I check it every few minutes just to make sure it's the right consistency. The hydrometer actually measures the specific gravity of the syrup. The higher the sugar concentration, the higher the hydrometer will float in it. And it has a stem on it with markings, and that's how you check where the concentration is and when you're done.
What temperature do you cook this at, and do you have to worry about burning it?
Should never have to worry about burning it unless for some reason the sap level in your pans get too low. It'd be like running a pan out of water on your stove, basically. And temperature I don't worry about. I just need to get it warm enough to boil. Don't have to worry about exactly what temperature that is. So there's a thermometer on the draw off point here, and I do watch that, and that gives me an indication when it's ready to draw some off. As sap becomes more and more concentrated with sugar, its boiling point goes up. So that thermometer will tell me about where, based on the temperature, about where that concentration is. And it just gives me an indication when to draw it off and then go finish it.
So then you take it and you actually move it to another cooking area.
Yes,
And why do you do that?
because the other one is much easier to control. I can control it more precisely. The boiler here does a good job of concentrating it, but it's kind of a crude thing to try to control precisely. And it just doesn't lend itself well to do that. But the other cooker, I heat that with propane, and it's really easy just to adjust the knob and get it just right. So, and much easier to check on.
How long does it take you to cook a batch of syrup?
This boiler here, I can go through about 17 gallons of sap each hour. So if you have 50 gallons of sap, that's going to be about 3 hours of cooking.
How much syrup do you get from a big tank of sap?
That tank on the stand there is 180 gallons. And it takes about 40 gallons of sap to make 1 gallon of syrup. It takes a lot of boiling. Maple sap, or I suppose any sap from any tree, it has the amount of sugar in it, which is what you're after, but it also has minerals in it. But when you boil that sap, those minerals will form almost a gritty sand, and that's what I like to strain out. Now, sometimes in the bottom of a jar of maple syrup, you might see a little bit of that. It's certainly nothing that's ever going to hurt you. It's probably nutritious, but it just means that his strainer didn't quite do a perfect job.
So you get it all cooked down to where you want it to be. Then how do you keep it? How do you preserve it?
We put it in pint or quart canning jars, and then if we think we're going to keep it for, oh, I don't know, 3-4 months or longer, we'll actually can it. We'll put it in a water bath canner and can it. And then the jars seal and they'll be good for a long time. You just keep them in a cool place and it'll be great shape.
How long does your syrup last then?
I've kept it for 2 years pretty easily.
And what do you do with it all?
Oh gosh, pancakes, waffles, ice cream, coffee, gifts for the neighbors or friends or enemies or whoever. Yeah, yeah. But it has no problem finding a home. No.